Hey friends, Andy here from Raphah, and I've just sat down and set up in the studio ready for a new session. I'm in the process of writing and producing my first full-length album. Not something I've done before. I've released plenty of EPs and singles, but never a longer form project. I'm really enjoying it, having more opportunity to tell a story through the different tracks, and it's taking shape nicely. I'm probably about halfway through. And I thought it would be a good idea to invite you into that process, to have a look behind the scenes as to how I make ambient music. I don't really know where it's going to go. I don't know how many sessions this is going to take, or whether I'll divide it up into different videos and share those with you. And this is normally the case when I'm writing music. I don't really know where it's going to go. I kind of go with the flow, improvise things, try different ideas, and it should give you a good insight as to how I put these things together. So let's make a start. Okay, so I use Logic Pro, and I tend to start with a template that I've created. I have all of my most regularly used instruments here on the left hand side, and then I've got a number of buses that I've got set up with reverb, delay, shimmer, sidechain reverb, an amp distortion that I sometimes throw things into to get a bit of grit and a bit of distortion. And you'll notice at the top the BPM is set to 54. I'm not going to be using a click for this track, and increasingly I find myself not using a click. I think for ambient music in particular, it just helps things to flow and sound a bit more natural. It took me a while to get out of that routine because I'd used a click for years to keep things tight and rhythmical, but that's the direction that I'm going with clicks at the moment. Okay, what I tend to do when I'm starting a track, not always the case, but will be in this one, is I lay down a pad. And the reason I do that is I find it easier to have something to work with, a canvas if you like. And having that pad in the background as a foundation and a bass helps me then to add in chord progressions, melodies, bass lines, and start to build from there. So I kind of start, I suppose, in the middle with the pad, and I work up and down in the frequency range to bass, and then up to the melody, add in the chords and the other elements around that. And so that's what we'll be doing now. And I'm going to start with a piano sound using one of my favorite piano plugins, which is Noir Felt from Native Instruments. And what I'm going to use is from their Particles presets, one called Play, Listen, Play. And it takes this really lovely felted piano sound, and I'm going to add in some reverb and delay, and it almost turns it into a pad to start with. So all I'm playing here in C, the octaves and the fifths. Really lovely sound. So let's get that recorded. I'm not going to do much, just probably 10 seconds or so of that. Okay, that should do. And we'll get rid of that. And then what I usually do on a piano track in particular is add in one of these tape emulation plugins as well, just to add a little bit of warmth and character. I also usually set up a bus and send it through to a bit of a sidechain reverb. More importantly for kind of solo piano, more distinct piano sounds, but I'm going to leave it on for this just because it allows the transient, the initial sound of that piano to come through, and then the reverb kicks in afterwards. Having said that, I'm going to add loads more washy reverb, so that might disappear in any case, but it'll make me feel better knowing it's on. Okay, so I'm going to take that and bounce that to an audio track. Mute that one. Okay, so we've got the audio track there. The first thing I'm going to do is stick on an EQ just to get rid of any nasty bass frequencies. Because if I don't do this now, it'll end up sounding a bit mushy. So just get rid of that. And then I am going to go with another reverb. And I'm going to use Soundtoys Superplate. Okay, so I'm going to put on some modulation to add some movement, roll down the low frequencies. I like the plate reverb on this, and then adjust the taste. So I don't want it to be too overwhelming at this stage. Okay, that should be good. Now I want a delay. And I'm going to use Echo Boy. If you don't have these Soundtoys plugins, then the stock Logic or any other delays and reverbs will do just as good a job. I'm just a bit of a fan of Soundtoys. Right, I'm going to go for, I usually use a dual echo or a ping pong. I'm going to go for a ping pong, just to add a bit of movement again and a bit of stereo width. Let's go for a quarter note and a dotted eighth. Again, roll back some of the lows, see how that sounds. Yep, it's beginning to sound a bit more pad-like. Good stuff. Okay, and then back to Soundtoys. I told you I liked them. I'm going to use the Crystallizer. This is one of my favourite plugins. I love this because it just adds such intense, high-frequency goodness. Right, and for this one, I'm going to use a preset. I'm going to go for the smooth crystals. Turn the mix way down because that's a bit too shrill. Just want a subtle, crispy, sparkly, shimmery high end. Nice. I'm going to put this on a repeat to save me stopping and starting the whole time. Right, and then Soundtoys again. I make no apologies. Pan Man. So on this one, I just want to add a bit of left to right stereo movement. You can achieve the same thing with a tremolo and slowing it right down. I've got my own preset that I've come up with. I don't actually want it that wide. It gives you an indication here of how wide left and right it's going. But you can also hear it, which is most important. And then I'm just going to turn the rate up slightly. So it just gives it a bit of movement, left to right. Sounding good. Okay, I'm going to bounce that again. I'm going to bounce that again. No, I didn't do it that time. Mute this one. Okay, sounding good. Now I'm going to add another reverb onto that, and this time I'm going to use Valhalla's Super Massive. This is a free plugin, by the way. If you haven't got it, I'd highly recommend it. Not just because it's free, but because it's epically good. You can create some massive reverbs that will go on until next Tuesday. So I don't want a massive one, I want a large, I think, and I do rather like Cirrus Major Echo Hall. So let's see what that sounds like. I'm going to pull the feedback down because that'll be too much. Yeah, sounding good, liking that. I think maybe those high frequencies are just a little bit harsh still, so I'm going to put another EQ on here and just attenuate those slightly. Want some high end, want some shimmer and sparkle, but not too much that's harsh on the ears. I'm going to leave that there, I might come back to that later on. But that's sounding good. I'm pleased with that. Okay. I'm going to bounce that again just so I can bake in that reverb and that EQ. And then what I'm going to do is stretch this out a little bit. Because by doing that, I find it often brings out some other little... it brings out some other little characters, some harmonics, some different things you wouldn't necessarily get just with the straight pad you've created, and it adds some real layers of interest. Yeah, you can just hear there's a nice sort of harmonic going on at the top. There's a bit more... what's a bit more in the bass as well, I think. It's drawing out something a bit different there. I like the way this fades in as well. It's working out rather nicely. It doesn't always go this smoothly, by the way. Sometimes I'll fiddle around for hours trying to come up with something that sounds good. But fortunately, because I've got the camera going, it's good, it's pleasing. Right, okay, now that's only 35 seconds. That's not long enough. Generally what I try and do is have a pad that lasts between 3 and 4 minutes, and then I'll work with that and I'll adjust it accordingly depending on where the track's going. So rather than just copy and paste that all the way, also because I want to preserve that nice fade in at the beginning, I don't want it fading in and out too much, I'm just going to copy up to about here and then drag that forward. And then I'm going to shorten that, so I'm actually going to take it back past where it was before and actually compress it slightly. Not in the usual compression sense, in terms of shorten it. Then I'm going to do the same again. Copy and paste that bit. Stretch it out again. So it just adds a bit of interest, a bit of randomness. Keeps it interesting. And then I'll even copy and paste that bit. And just keep doing that and stretching it out. Where are we up to now? 2 minutes. And those crossfades should be doing their job, preventing any jumps or skips or gaps. Oh no, didn't want to do that. Okay. So we've got up to about 3.5 minutes. We'll leave it there. Let's just check that those crossfades are doing what they should be doing. Don't want any nasty gaps. Yeah, good. There's almost like this nice little warble going on there as well. Very nice. Okay, what am I doing? Right, so there is the pad. One more thing I'm going to try actually is with this track is to transpose it down, just to see how that sounds, because that also can sometimes give you some really nice artifacts, some harmonics, and a different texture. Yeah, it's okay. I'm not entirely sure about that more bassy frequency. It's a little bit boomy. I might do that later as an additional pad, but for now I think I'm going to leave it where it was because I like that. Okay, so that's the basic starting pad, and sometimes I'll have 2, 3, 4, 5 different pads. I try and stick to different frequency ranges with each pad so they don't compete for space. But that's a nice place to start now, because I can, if I duplicate this, unmute that and go back, let's find a different piano sound. I've got a preset that I created called Expressive Felt, which is a nice now, once it's playing, let's play that pad. Just gives me something to riff on and to explore some ideas. It kind of helps me to be creative rather than trying to play piano lines and come up with chords without any backing. So always a good place to start, which is why I tend to go for that. I think I'll leave it there for now, just because otherwise this video will turn into being about 2 or 3 hours long. And I'm sure you don't have that much time to spend watching me create things all in one go. However, I will come back to it and I'll do another video where I start to explore some more chordal ideas, melodies, and develop this track into something that hopefully will appear on that album. So thanks as always for joining me. I hope you found that interesting and useful. And I will be back soon with part 2. So take care of yourselves.